Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum, and today we're continuing down Night Fighter Lane, and we're going to be talking about the Boulton Paul, the Defiant. Now, the Defiant is a classic example of a good idea that was a good idea until it wasn't. And I'm going to tell you how that works. But first, we're going to talk about I am coiffed. What am I? I am the matador of the night fighter. My name is Fred Bell, prepared to die. It doesn't work for me. No one's going to buy it. But I am the coiffed in I think a matador hat here. We're going to talk this off camera. Oh, there it goes. Good catch by the Kenny. Now, today we are talking about the Boulton Paul Defiant. They were relatively short build, and we are going to use a Hurricane as an example because it kind of looked like a Hurricane. Greg is going to be able to throw up a plan view of the Defiant, but I am going to use this as an example because there are a couple of changes, but the designer on this, John Dudley North, thought it would be a great idea to have an intercept fighter with a turret in the back. Because think about that. If you could have an airplane that was as fast as a fighter, and you could have a turret to protect your six, or you increase your range of firepower, not only you could shoot from the wings, but you had a field of fire back here. Now, the turret had an interrupter with the tail, which all of the turrets did. And so he thought that was a great idea. And there was an Air Ministry specification in the early 30s that kind of threw this idea out there. They jumped on it along with a couple of other manufacturers. In 1937 was the first flight. Of course, this is a liquid-cooled aircraft, so they were messing around with early versions of the Merlin engine. But what they ended up with was something, and it had the turret in the back. It had a lot of drag. Okay, so the aircraft only had a top speed of about 304 miles an hour. If you look at the 109 at that time, or the Spitfire, I'm standing in front of a Mark 14 Spitfire, they were faster to begin with, but the idea of a fighter-destroyer still really intrigued the Air Ministry. So they said, go ahead and build them. So they built 2 squadrons of those aircraft, and they threw them into the line. Now, they threw them in right at the start of World War II against Germans. They had some success, but it soon became clear that the fighter-destroyer, very similar to the Bf-110 that we talked about last week in its original mode, that it needed a fighter escort. That completely defeats the purpose of the aircraft. It did, though, with all the types, because it was literally thrown into battle, it did, reasonably well, but it was clear that it was not going to really work out well in its in its initial conversation. Now, one of the things it could do is it could sneak up on the German bombers underneath because of this turret, and we talked about the 110 firing into the bellies. The tactic on this airplane to come under the bombers was not to attack them, but to go underneath them and fire up into them. And it could be quite lethal. Now, the turret in this initially was just a swing turret, but they soon realized that they could not get the turret traversed fast enough, so they went to a power turret. That created other issues. Now, you've seen like a B-17 and other turrets in airplanes, especially a rotating turret, because the gunner is in the turret. What does that do, Greg? What does it do? It makes it extremely difficult to get out of the turret.
Let us now take you in a Boulton Paul turret for the first time. Discover how much you have learned and how much forgotten of Boulton Paul drill. Disconnect oxygen supply and intercom. Unfasten safety strap. Open doors by pushing release handle forward, and vacate turret. Remember the sequence of the drill you have seen before and after a flight, because by doing each thing in the correct order, you will avoid making mistakes which may have quite serious consequences. Mastery of drill will make you more than just efficient. It will give you a greater degree of confidence in your guns, and in yourself.
So with the power turret, they put a power turret in it. Now, an interesting Fred fun fact is, where did they test? Another Fred fun fact. We are throwing out a plethora of Fred fun facts today. Greg, we're going to throw out a whole bunch of them. Where did they test the power turret initially? With the Hawker Demon. They had the power turret in the back. They had tested it in the Demon, and it didn't work out very well. Now, the other problem was, what happens? You got to bail out, right? We talked about that. The rear gunner in this aircraft wore a thing called a rhino suit, and it had like a bulge on the back, but it was a nightmare to get out. And so a lot of the air crew were lost. The tail gunners were lost, or the rear gunner was lost, because they just never could get out of the airplane. And so what ended up happening was, it became quite clear in the Battle of France and into the Battle of Britain that we had essentially the equivalent of the Ju-87, which the Germans had an airplane that had been completely outclassed in a dive bomber. This aircraft could not work under its primary function for a variety of reasons. Too slow, not very maneuverable, and it just was completely outclassed. But there was an airborne radar that the British had been able to miniaturize to get into the airplane. And what were the British having? They were having the Blitz. They were getting attacked at night. They turned around and equipped 13 squadrons. Now, remember, there was only 1,064 built, so 13 squadrons is the majority of the fleet, into night fighters, and it worked extremely well. It was the same attack profile, like I just said. They would get in, home in on them, and then they would fire up into the bellies of the Henkels or the Ju-88s or whatever was there. Germans probably didn't know they were there unless they saw the plumes from the exhaust stacks. But it worked exceedingly well. It worked so well that they used it as a night fighter primarily, and then it was replaced in 1942 by the Mosquito and the Beaufighter, which we are going to talk about those. But so the airplane, again, this is one that started out as a great idea, didn't work, retooled it, and then they went ahead and it found its own. It actually found its own. Although I would not, especially at night, want to be a turret gunner in one of these based on that rhino suit. Everything I've read about that is that was, an absolute nightmare to try to get out. So this is going to lead me to my unique drink of the day. How we want to call it that? This is where Greg tries to kill me. Today, it's dry, botanical, bubbly, lavender, naturally flavored sparkling beverage with other natural flavors. Now, it's non-GOMO, so we did not kill any GOMOs in making this. No GMOs, and it's gluten-free. Greg, you just from giving me botulism tainted soda. Oh yeah, there you go. Give me the little heart symbol. There you go. 80 calories. We know he's trying to kill me. It's just lulling me into a sense. So the salute today, we got a nice pop out of it. The salute today are these crews. Think about the crews that went in, especially during the Battle of Britain, that had a marginal piece of equipment in this aircraft, in the Defiant, and still went up because their country was being attacked and fought, especially those tail gunners. So if you were air crew in this, and you would have to be above 96 years old, so I don't know that there's any Defiant air crew running around, but if you were flying around in this airplane and you were out, especially at night, which was probably the most dangerous thing you could do, I salute you. I'm not admitting this. It's awful, Greg. It's terrible. No, it's actually, this is quite good. It's a refreshing beverage. Dry botanical butter. I'm almost speechless, Greg. Yeah, here we go. See, there you go. There we go, Greg. That's actually pretty good. I'm going to have a second sip, and I also bathed in it just now. Greg, I don't know how that one slipped through the the maniacal Greg Kinney buying of soda. But that one's actually quite nice. I would buy that. And how many of those have I said I would ever buy? Maybe 1 in 200 episodes. So, but the aircraft didn't end there. So it fought on as a night fighter, and then it had really a couple of other things, and it lived on in the form of an electronic countermeasure airplane. And it had 2 roles. One was a thing called Moonshine that was a transmitter, and as near as I can tell, what it would do is it would make itself look like a whole gaggle of bombers. And so on German radar. The only downside to that was the Germans would scramble a whole bunch of fighters to go after this whole bomber stream, and there's one guy out there in his rhino suit getting chased after. But it would pull fighters away from other areas. So what they would do is spoof the air defense over here, and the British or the Americans would go on the other side. So it had that role. The other one was called Mandrill, and Mandrill was a noise jammer. So that would literally jam the radar to, fuzz it up or noise it up or whatever, and that would create interference. The challenge was that in these early electronic warfare, they didn't have a lot of power, so it couldn't take down all kinds of radars. And again, as I understand it, it could only take down a section. And so maybe the aircraft, a lot of times you jam and then the strike goes over the top of you, the strike package. But those were the 2 areas that it was involved in, was in electronic countermeasure work because of the size of the fuselage. Then the other thing that was it was a target tow. It was a high-speed target tow, which is kind of cool. And then lastly, something that you would not think, Greg, and that was it was evolved because they took the turret out in early ejection seat development. So if you were a brave enough soul to get shot out on one of these, where they take the turret out and they'd put an ejection seat in there and they'd shoot you out, probably with the old backbreakers, which were, you're sitting on top of a mortar shell and they light that off, and you're shot out of from a concussion of that shell detonating, you're shot out of the airplane. That was how a lot of those worked, and that's hence the term backbreaker, because it was not a gentle experience leaving the airplane. But after that, about mid-1944, the airplane was pretty much gone. So although it had a build rate of about 1,064 airplanes, there are very few represented. There are only a couple of them represented in British museums. It would be a cool airplane to get because it's such an oddity. But like a lot of the post-war airplanes that we know about, it was just scrapped. There's a couple of them that have survived, and that is about it. They are gone. Now, if you want to amaze your friends, you can get this 1,000-piece puzzle set, and you can make, suitable for framing, a puzzle and hang it up in your living room or use it there, or get thousands of hours, tear it down and rebuild it, thousands of hours of fun. Click on that link and Jason will rush one of these to your door and you will have a total amount of fun. I say total fun there. Now, if you come across us on YouTube, all we do are military aircraft. It's long form videos. We do some funny stuff, and then we get down into the nitty gritty. If you can get past the funny stuff and you don't mind the airplanes, give us a subscription. Send us to somebody who likes Warbirds. That's all we do. We come up with a theme, and then we kind of go down a path, and we start all over again. So we'd sure love that thumbs up and a subscription. If you came across us on Facebook, give us a like and give us a comment. We love your comments, especially if you have aircraft that you want to suggest. We actually have done aircraft suggestions, and we love that kind of stuff. If I am wrong, which Greg, I'm never wrong, or off base, let me know. We'd like to know about the details on this airplane, and you might know something that I don't, which is great, and we will interact with you in the comment section. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.